bespoke radio for the masses.
Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army.
If the game is rigged, change the game. Game changer.
I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world.
This is Fade to Black with your host, Jimmy Church, on the Game Changer Radio Network and KGRA, the Global Radio Alliance.
I need your help to get to the year 1985.
You're listening to Fade to Black with Jimmy Church on the Game Changer Network.
Welcome. Fade to Black. Bespoke radio for the masses. Yeah, how you doing? How you doing? Today's Tuesday, March 10th, 2020. 70 days into the new year, just 296 days left. We are live from a bunker. A bunker that is somewhere in the middle of beautiful downtown Burbank, California. And I would like to welcome everybody listening all around the world, all across the United States. Hither and thither, to and fro, back and forth, up and down, east and west, north and south, far and near. This is Fade to Black for KJCR, the Game Changer Network, and KGRA, the Planets. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. What is cracking, everybody? How you doing? How you doing? All right, get ready. Now, I'm going to make this announcement all week that tonight and every night from now on, we are now broadcasting live on YouTube. We're broadcasting live on Twitter and Facebook. In addition to KGRA, The Planet, TalkStream Live, Spreaker, TuneIn, and iHeartRadio. Holy crap. That's right. There you go. We figured it out. All this gear, all this equipment, all this stuff that is here. The fact that we weren't able to pull that off is a shame, but it's done now. So welcome everybody. Tonight we have very special guest Bob McGwire is here. We're going to be discussing artificial intelligence, UFOs and UAPs, and the search for them. Quite frankly, it doesn't get much better than that. Bob is one of the world's top researchers in the field of artificial intelligence and has been leading the way using computer technology to help detect UFOs and UAPs over the skies of the United States. He got his BSEE Electrical Engineering and BS Applied Math from Auburn University and his PhD in Applied Mathematics from Brown University. Are you intimidated yet? You should be. Bob worked at Sandia National Labs in Albuquerque starting in 1977, and he was faculty at Auburn University from 1984 to 1986, the Institute for Defense Analyses, SCARY, Center for Communications Research from 1986 all the way to 2011. Currently, Bob is faculty at Virginia Tech, and he's been there since 2011 as professor and chief scientist of the Ted and Karyn Hume Center for National Security and Technology. He has founded 3 companies, Hawkeye 360 Inc., Federated Wireless Inc., and is currently the president of UAP Tracking Network Inc. His website is UAPTN.com. The links are over at JimmyChurchRadio.com. And I would like to welcome for the first time to Fade to Black, Bob McGwire. Bob, good evening, man. How are you?
Jimmy, I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on.
It's great to have you here. I'm feeling a little intimidated, Bob. So let's just, I'm just going to let you know where I'm coming from. But before we get started, you get the first-time guest disclaimer. You ready?
I am.
Bob, it's just you and I sitting on my couch as friends. And where that conversation starts, it starts. Where it ends, it ends. But we're going to end as friends. You ready to go?
I'm ready.
Now, okay, Bob, we need to, for the audience, to set the record straight on a couple of things about you so they understand the conversation moving forward, okay? So I'm going to be very direct. You work very closely with all of the security agencies. It is your job. Do you consider yourself a member? Do you consider yourself a spook?
So for a long time, I worked for them. But when I left the Institute for Defense Analysis and came to Virginia Tech, my job was to try to help young people who were doing science, technology, engineering, and math to look at careers working for the intelligence community, the Department of Defense, and the corporations that serve them. And that's because it had become increasingly difficult to hire the really, really good technical talent. And so the Hume Center was founded by Ted Hume, who was a former senior executive at the Central Intelligence Agency, left the CIA, started a company, did very well. His company was bought out, and from some of the proceeds of the sale of his company, he started the Ted and Karyn Hume Center. And its job was to give young people experiential learning projects so they could be exposed to the kinds of science and engineering they would be doing while working for the government. At the same time, not go deep into debt, so that should they choose to go to work for the government or the corporations that serve it, they could afford to do so. They wouldn't have to look for a high-paying job just to pay off their school debt. So the center has started modestly and has really taken off, where we have hundreds of undergraduates that go through experiential learning projects where they are exposed to the kind of problem sets that would be a very good training for them to work in this community. And we're filling a big need. So if you want to say that Virginia Tech is a major, and I do mean major, feeder school for the intelligence community and DOD and its corporations, that would be a true statement.
So, and of course, without just moving around in a clandestine way here, we are directly referencing the CIA or the NSA or the NRO or any of the agencies that deal with security and intelligence gathering.
That is correct.
Okay. Now, like I said, I'm nervous, man. I'm nervous. Is this, Bob? And I know that. Okay. Is this the rumors, the statements that have been made over the years? Is that you never actually leave one of the intelligence agencies? That you are always directly connected, and you have your security oaths. So let's address both sides of that before we move forward. Are you currently under a security oath that I need to dance around tonight?
I am under a security oath. I continue to have a security clearance because some of the projects that we do are for one or more of the agencies you had mentioned. Right. And as such, I'm exposed to classified data.
Okay. So if I go into that zone tonight, and I will, and you can't answer the question, I think we're all going to understand why. Okay, and you can certainly state that. And now, what about the first part of the question, which is you never actually leave the corporation, right? That you're still bound somewhat. Do you feel that way about yourself personally?
Yeah, I certainly do. I feel, first of all, I have lots of friends in the community, was there for a long time, and I developed very deep relationships. The two of the companies I started were with other people who had left working for the government. That's Federated Wireless and Hawkeye 360. And just let me give you an example of why one example from me anyway, why you don't really leave. Hawkeye 360 is the first commercial company ever to build spacecraft that try to geolocate transmitters on the ground. And of course, you can see why that would be of interest to security entities that work for the United States government. And the National Reconnaissance Office has made Hawkeye 360 the first commercial supplier of geolocation data in its history. So it's kind of we're first in the business. We're doing work for the NRO because one of their jobs is signals intelligence. And so geolocations is a thing.
Am I in the Hawkeye 360 database?
That would be really illegal. Okay. You can look for your signal, but we can't say that's Jimmy Church's signal. That would be really bad.
Okay, got it. Now, I know what we do here. You know what we do here, and I've always wanted to reach out to get you on the show, but I didn't think that it would ever be possible for the obvious reasons. You know, you would just politely decline. But as it turns out, that you, Bob, you've been creeping. You've been creeping in the background.
Indeed.
You have been listening to Fade to Black. And that I kind of expect, you know, I just don't know who's listening to the show. It's a big show, and you just never know who's out there. But I would assume that our website is monitored. It would have to be, otherwise they're not doing their job. Okay, so I'm cool with that. That's fine. But did your name? Do you know? Did you get flagged? Did anybody reach out to you going, hey, you're going to be on Jimmy Church's show and we're going to be listening?
The answer is yes. I had people call me and say, you're going to be on Jimmy Church's show, and that's cool. I won't tell you who they are or where they work, but some did.
And I expect that. I'm actually you know what? It's almost an honor. If it was the other way, right? Then it's like I'm not doing my job, right? And neither are they. So there you go. Okay, so now actually let's move forward. You have and I have interviewed the top of the top, and I'm very proud of the history of this show. But your CV, your resume is absolutely insane. Okay, and I went, Bob, and looked up your mentions, okay, your citations in different published papers. Okay, do you know what that number is? Do you have any idea what that number is?
To be honest with you, I don't.
Okay, are you ready?
Yeah, go for it.
You have 586 citations in published papers since 2015. Right? That's crazy talk. And I went down and through. You have 731 public citations that are listed. And like I said, 586 since 2015, and you go through, and I got the full list of 586 right in front of me, and I went down and looked at some of the recent ones, and the titles of these papers are about as intimidating as it gets. And so, as I want the audience to understand our conversation tonight, and who you are, who Bob is, and where this information is coming from. And I've got to commend you. You've had a very, very busy life, and you have accomplished an awful lot. So with that, let's jump into this, okay?
Go for it.
I want to talk artificial intelligence first. And there's two sides of this conversation that are raised by everybody. And then I want to get into the esoteric side of artificial intelligence too, the hard theoretical stuff that is out there on the fringes. But first off, the two conversations that are normally had is that AI is, the first one is AI is 50 years off from being anything real, and it's going to be safe and fun and good for humanity. There's that side. Then the other side is, in a couple of weeks, it's going to take over the world and kill everybody, right? And those are the two conversations.
They are. They haven't been helped by all of the popular movies and television shows that have AI in them.
Do we have something to worry about?
So I would say that it's if men and women can think up really difficult things to do with technology, it can be misused. And by that I mean, it is possible to turn over weapon systems to artificial intelligence control systems. But if you do that and you're not assured that the artificial intelligence control system works properly in all cases, that's probably irresponsible. So a big part of the research that's going on in the control systems for all sorts of things that will help the intelligence community and DoD do its job is understanding how those things work, understanding what are the limits of its capabilities and how to bound the capabilities in such a way that it doesn't get off track. But in all human endeavors, mistakes are made. So it's a long, serious learning process. But the facts are, this kind of stuff is already being done, Jimmy. The USS Zumwalt is a naval ship, and it can operate autonomously, and it has big guns on it. And
it looks like it's straight out of Star Wars.
Exactly.
It's a crazy.
Its shape is to have a low radar profile, so it's hard to see coming.
It's a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful ship. And it certainly represents the future. But it also scares the crap out of me. And the reason why it does is one of my fears, and I think it's a genuine concern, is that if we have some automated machine guns mounted on a robot, some tracked vehicle that can autonomously go through a neighborhood or a city and kill the bad guy, right? Okay? And we've got a swarm of those things out there, and suddenly they just decide to kill everything that moves, including me and you. How would we stop that? And that's the part that I think scares everybody is how do they detect good guy from bad, and who's got the off switch? And if the intelligence is there, they should know it autonomously that we have an off switch. So this artificial intelligence has already got a workaround. That's the part that kind of freaks everybody out.
I get it. So let me dispel that almost immediately. So the way the autonomous systems that are deployed now, the way they work is they inform a human being that they need to do something, or something is of interest, or there's an alert that there's a danger, and a human sitting on a control panel makes the final decision.
is the that doesn't really make me feel better, and I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why. Is that when we start to get into machine learning and AI being enabled to modify and correct and fix its own code and to learn, then these things could be written out of the code. Right? Or is there some bona fide safety code that's going to be in there to prevent anything like this from happening?
That's an excellent question. And the deployed systems right now do not write their own code. So that's probably coming, that systems will write their own code. And it's been predicted for a long while that machines will, in fact, begin to rewrite their own code. And many people have heard of Stan Ulam and then Ray Kurzweil talk about the singularity. And the singularity is where the computer systems all of a sudden are able to write code and update themselves faster than any human can control them. And so they become runaway, writing their own code and making themselves better. We are not close to that yet. So right now, systems that are in weapons do not rewrite their own code.
This is the thing. Go. Okay? Let's talk about Go for a second. Go is a game that is played over in Korea, China, Japan.
Yep.
And the Go, and there's a few different Go computers, and we don't need to get specifically into that. But the Go computers just recently took down the world champion, and I don't foresee too much more Go versus human competitions because it's fruitless. There's nothing to gain anymore. You can't beat the computers anymore. They're that successful. But what they did is they took I think it's Go Zero, might be, I could have the name wrong. But that is a machine learning computer. And what they did is they took all of the Go coding that they spent years on, all of the moves and all the possibility, coded into it, removed that, and just put in machine learning code and said, okay, learn the game. It learned the game. And that's what took down the world champ. Right? And you could not predict what Go would do next. And that was the thing. There was no human part of it. That's not the scary part, though, Bob. So they went and took the same idea and applied it to chess. Now, we all know about Kasparov and IBM's Big Blue and its computer. They spent a decade writing code of all the possible moves in chess, right? Years and years and years. And that's how it ran. So they took the Go, and it was successful, right? Okay. They take the Go computer, they take out all of the code, and they say, learn chess. In one day, the Go chess version not only learned chess, but kicked the ass out of everything out there. And because of that, on that day, there is no more chess human competition. Because they shut down the IBM computer. They can't. And that is machine. And it was simple code. It was the simplest of machine learning code. That's the part that scares me. The ability to learn with the capacity of 1,000 human brains, taking 1,000 years of learning, compressing all of that into with the chipset in one day. Doesn't that scare you and make you a little nervous?
It is an amazing thing. And what you're talking about is the reinforcement learning mechanisms that are on those machines. And you train them essentially like you do a child. You reward them when they do something good, and you punish them when they do something bad. Now, you don't beat them. You don't beat your computer, but you raise and lower a score. You raise and lower the gain they get in terms of the computer algorithms keeping score for itself. And by doing this reward and punishment system, it learns how to perform better. So, but it's also possible, and it is done, that you limit the things the computer is allowed to do, even though it says, if I did that, I could do better. You say, no, you are not allowed to do that. So any responsible algorithm writer would not allow a computer that's involved with lethal systems to do anything it could learn to do. It just would not be allowed.
Is there an agency? Is there some governing body out there that is monitoring the progress of artificial intelligence, and to make sure that these safeguards, and that there are nothing but good, honest minds working on this? Because it only takes one bad actor with a simple set of code to literally run the world.
So there are, in fact, safeguards in several different entities inside both the intelligence community and DoD. But, Jimmy, you know as well as I do, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that there are no bad people in the world. So there will be bad people that come along and do bad things, even with these computers, because that's the nature of human beings. Some are good and some are bad. The safeguards are putting limits on those things these computer systems are ever allowed to do. And if those limits are removed, then the way the system would have to work is it has to have the ability to verify quickly that the code is operating as it's supposed to operate and will not leave the bounds. So safeguards are being worked on all the time to prevent these computers from doing the wrong thing. Human beings might make mistakes. I'm not telling you they won't, but I'm telling you this is constantly being pursued to keep these computers operating within bounds. It is top of the list of things that people have to do if they're doing these kinds of computer programming things. So I'll give you an example. Our center worked on using drones to fly over squadrons of Marines and to tell them what the situational awareness was of everything around them, so that if they were about to be attacked or there was some danger that could be inferred from the data these drones were gathering, it would send that data down to the squadron. In this particular case, they had no lethality. They were strictly sensors. So that's a very good thing, and so there's less limits placed on what those drones can do because they don't have any lethality. So there are limits to what can be done on those systems that operate things like the USS Zumwalt. They're just things it simply is not allowed to do. And if the humans that are in charge of those systems, remotely or nearby, detect that the thing is malfunctioning, they can be stopped and turned off. So we have to trust the people who are doing these kinds of things to put those kind of safeguards and limits on them. And to the extent that they do not do it, then that's a failure. But I assure you, this kind of verification and validation is top of the list of what's done.
We've got about 2 minutes before the break. Is it safe to say, Bob, that the country or the private company or the country that gets to general intelligence and AI first is the winner?
That is a very good question, and the answer is probably yes. Now, for those of us in the United States, I'm going to give you Bob's opinion. There aren't actual peers that can integrate systems across large sets of capabilities any better than the United States. They just can't do it. So to the extent that you have one of these computers that's an artificial general intelligence, and suddenly it takes off and can train itself better than any human could ever do, that will almost surely happen in the United States first, unless things dramatically change. And then from there, the other major advantage the United States has over anyone who might decide they're an adversary is the integration of our command and control systems with all sorts of other things they would need to have a bad effect is not, no one else compares. So it's just right now we are the superpower in artificial intelligence, and because the artificial intelligence we have can control systems better than anyone else that might decide to be mean to us. So right now we're good. Is that going to last forever? Of course it isn't. China is working very, very hard to become a near top, and they're building big computers and trying awfully hard. And so it's a foot race to see who can get to artificial general intelligence first. My own feeling is right now we're playing with Tinker toys in terms of this artificial intelligence, and we aren't close to that.
We'll take our break right here. When we come back, we have to discuss what is AGI. That is the key, and we're going to go straight there when we come back. Our guest tonight, Bob McGwier. And don't you worry, everybody. We're going to get to the UFOs and the aliens. Bob, stay right there. We'll be right back. This is Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Follow me on Twitter at JChurchRadio, on the Game Changer Network and KGRA, The Planet. Stay with us. Welcome back. Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Tonight, our guest is Bob McGwier. Got a lot to talk about tonight. I want to remind everybody, tomorrow night, Dr. Diana Pasulka joins us. And then Thursday night is another Fader night with open lines all night long. Tonight, Bob McGwier, we're talking about AI, and we are going to get to the search of UFOs and UAPs over the skies of the United States and using the latest computer technology to do that. We'll get to that in just a bit. But right before the break, Bob, we started to talk about AGI. And I think everybody understands at this point artificial intelligence and have a general idea of what that may be. But AGI is the real concern and is the actual goal for everybody at this point. What is AGI? How would you define it?
Okay, so first of all, I want to say that it is not universally accepted what AGI is. So I'm going to give you kind of what I think are the big features that most people that are working on artificial intelligence would agree on would be part of AGI. And so the ability to plan actions, the ability to learn from what's going on in the environment or when presented new data. And once you learn and plan, you need to be able to represent knowledge in a way that can be stored. So it has to have memory, so it can learn and plan and put the results in memory. And then it has to be able to reason, has to solve puzzles, form strategies, make judgments, even when things are very uncertain. It needs to communicate in a language that allows it to interact with the environment. So if you want to talk to a computer, it has to communicate in natural language, and all of these skills need to be integrated in an efficient way so that the computer doing the artificial general intelligence interacts with you as if it were a conscious entity. So there were developed all along from the earliest days tests for when you had a artificial general intelligence, and Alan Turing was one of the first people that made a test for artificial general intelligence, and he wrote this paper called The Imitation Game, and that's where the movie about him got its name, even though it wasn't about artificial general intelligence. So it's a machine and a human both converse with somebody else who's sitting in the middle, and the AGI wins if the person grading who's most human picks the AGI. So when that happens, or that thing has become artificial general intelligence enabled, according to Alan Turing. Now, Steve Wozniak, who was with Apple, he had a more practical test. If a machine could enter the average home, go and figure out where the coffee was, figure out how to turn on the coffee maker, fill the basket full of coffee, and make a cup of coffee and take it to whoever was going to drink it, that was the Wozniak coffee test. So there are all sorts of these tests that are generally meant to test the ability to reason, represent knowledge, plan, learn, and communicate in an integrated fashion. So I'm giving you kind of this high-level overview without diving down into details, because the diving down into details is really complicated mathematics and logic.
So if this stage is achieved, which is developing a machine that can understand and learn a simple task like coffee that a human being can, and once that is done, then the floodgates are open, right? It's just off to the races, because that's the moment where these machines can start to learn and teach themselves.
Yes, indeed, and that is indeed the goal. So when you teach a machine to learn and make coffee, the next task it needs to do may not be making coffee, but it will learn some things while making the coffee that it might use to do the new task.
That's right.
So it's called transfer learning. So you need to do the learning of the task, but you also need to be able to generalize that which you've learned to other tasks. That is a real artificial general intelligence.
And if it gets to that point, it sounds so simple, doesn't it? But if it gets to that point, now we have the computing power of making, millions and millions of decisions per second, far surpassing the limits of the human brain, where now it would actually be doing the work of multiple doctorates, right? Multiple scientists, where you would have a room full of brain power, and you said, okay, guys, we need a cure for coronavirus. We need a vaccine. And they've got to go to work. Or you can go to this AGI system and say, we need a vaccine for coronavirus. And this thing cranks it out in seconds. Right? Is that where we're at with this?
That's where we're heading.
Yeah.
But, again, so the ability to do the detail work with mechanized pieces, mix the right chemicals, put them together in just the right way, figure out the order of things to put into it. That's a lot to ask of a machine right now. But in fact, what you've said is a goal. And just as an aside, while you're talking about coronavirus, it was an artificial intelligence company in Canada, which long before everyone else knew it, said that there was a major problem with some kind of virus. And that was the first prediction of the coronavirus by an AI company in Canada.
The other part to this is, if an AGI machine finds out that not only it has itself to work with, but if it has access to the internet and it finds out that all of the world's information and history is out there for it to collect information from, then we go into a danger zone that we might not be able to stop. Is there a way to put these safeguards in? Because you wouldn't want an AGI computer to know about the internet, would you?
So I think that they will not be very useful overall in a completely connected world that we live in now if they did not have access to the internet. So we're going to have to figure out restrictions to place on them of things they are allowed to do with the information and things they're allowed to do and not allowed to do in accessing information. So again, it's you want to build a capability, but at the same time you want to build in restrictions. If you don't do both simultaneously, you've done it incorrectly.
The other part to this, and I've heard some pretty smart people like Neil deGrasse Tyson say some pretty crazy statements like, well, if I had an AGI computer that was running amok, I would just shoot it with a shotgun, right, and take it out. Well, I would think, okay, well, what's your response to a statement like that from Tyson?
So that's a little bit of hype. I think that's a little over the top. First of all, I don't think I would allow a artificial general intelligence right now to, when it's running amok, to have a weapon that could stop me. And the right response is to have an automatic system which says that machine is running amok, turn it off.
Well, unplugging it just seems too simple.
But literally, that's really kind of your last line of defense, because these things, they have to have energy to function. If you deprive them of energy, they can't function. So that has to be part of the safeguard.
I would think, this is where just science fiction comes into play, that any computer with this level of intelligence already knows that this option is available to us, and they've got a serious workaround. And I don't know what that is. Maybe they'll beam in electricity via Tesla coils. I don't know. I don't know. But I would think that something that simple, right? The off switch, the trigger switch, pulling the plug out, shooting it, whatever the solutions may be, that the computer is already 1,000 years in front of us on those kind of primitive thoughts.
So the science fiction stuff is certainly a thing people think about when they build these systems. But deep inside of these computers, I would build. You remember 2010, the sequel to 2001, where they had this knife switch that would cut the cable inside where the computer couldn't reach it.
Right.
So those kinds of things would be put into these systems so that the computer itself simply didn't have the physical ability to remove them. And if activated, the machine would be deprived of energy. It's just irresponsible not to put those kinds of things inside.
Now, okay. Now let's go into a hypothetical here, which is this. You program into the AGI to benefit the planet, right? To benefit us, and one of the concerns you punch in is, let's solve. I'll just pick something. Let's solve pollution. Let's solve global warming. Right? Let's solve trolling on the internet, whatever it may be. Right? And you punch that in, and the computer just kills the human race.
That would be a bad outcome.
Because we're the causers of pollution, right? We're the causers of global warming. We are the trolls on the internet. I mean, it thinks it's it's doing what it's told. It's fixing the pollution problem. Right? Is this a real issue, something that we would have to be concerned about? And I know I'm going to the extreme, but we're also talking about something that isn't human here, that would think logically pretty quickly, because even babies can think, fairly logically at amazing speed at a very young age. Well, we're going to have these same expectations from computers that may not have that, right?
So again, it's the responsible computer programming and enabler is going to build in things that are like Asimov's laws. But we have to figure out how to make Asimov's laws bound the things that the robot computer is capable of doing. So the thing you would, again, remember we're teaching these things by reinforcement learning. So the thing that played Go, the thing that won the chess match, the same thing that you've now taught how to do something, and you don't want it to do something bad, then its reward is doing something good for humanity, and at the same time not killing them is the good outcome. And so it learns those two things together. So there has to be a responsible programming of these things so that the bad outcome is negatively rewarded really badly while it's being trained. And is this going to fix it for all time? No one can see that, but it's certainly going to fix it for the foreseeable future in the way these things will be programmed. Because they're going to be taught like babies. They're going to be rewarded and punished when they give the right outcome.
What scares you most? I mean, what makes you lay awake at night when it comes to AGI and artificial intelligence?
Well, right now, the thing that scares me most is people need something to do. So if robots and computers replace all activities of human beings, that's not a good outcome. So I think we want to responsibly bring these things online so that while the computer replacing people who are doing dangerous or menial tasks, that they're also helping people to learn to do new things and do other things and live productive lives, even though they can no longer do things that the computer can do easier, and or a robot or a machine can do easier than a human being can do. You can enhance their lives by the computer helping them to learn other things. It's just the world will change when this happens, but it doesn't have to be all negative. So the one of the things that I think people never bring up that I do believe is likely to come is the interface between the computer and the human, so that they become our partners in doing things. So there is no replacement for the intuitive leaps that a human being can take. So the computer will have this extremely fast calculation and this extremely broad ability to store vast amounts of data and sift it at an extremely fast rate. But the kind of intuitive leaps that a human can do, I really don't see an easy way to do that computer unless you just roll a dice and let it choose things to think about. And I just don't see that happening. So computer humans working together is kind of the best outcome to me.
What scares me is the unemployed Russian computer engineer who was bored. That's what makes me nervous.
Well, it should make you nervous because the unemployed computer person certainly used their skills for bad things in the 2016 election. So I'm not going to sit here and tell you bad people won't do bad things when they have no other way to make a living. So we need to make sure people are able to do things.
Is there, off-the-shelf stuff, right? You go to Fry's, you buy the latest and greatest, right? You buy a motherboard, buy a chipset, you buy a nice power supply, some fans with neon lights on it, right? Slap it in a computer case. You laugh because you know exactly that's your dream. I
have one in my office.
Yeah, right, exactly. Could that computer sustain the correct AGI code if it was written?
That is, it could not. And that's because think of it this way, the human brain has 100 billion neurons and a quadrillion synapses. And right now, that's not easily done inside of a computer, but it's coming. There's no doubt about it. So making a thing that's interconnected in a way the brain is connected, so all of these crazy different things that seemingly are unrelated but inform different pieces of the learning system, how they're related so it could have another unplanned activity. Those things are coming. Right now, the computers are not complex enough to do that level of abstract thinking, but it's coming. So the answer right now is no, but it will come. I don't know whether it's 10 years or 40 years. Ray Kurzweil claims it's 40 years, but it's coming.
Kurzweil even said it could happen as early as 2018.
He did. He thought that his latest prediction, I think, is to earliest is 2018, the longest is 2045, and he thinks it'll be before the 2020s are over.
Yes, and that scares me because Ray's a smart guy, and there are a lot of smart, intelligent people in the private sector that have unlimited funding and have been told to go and get this. There are large corporations out there with deep pockets that know that the winner of this race is going to be the one that crosses the finish line with AGI in their back pocket. And when I think about things like Google, it's one thing to talk about Virginia Tech or a government-controlled investing in research. That's one thing. But you don't know what's going on privately out there with some pretty crazy people that are really smart. And, and that is their goal too, right? They're racing against everybody else.
Well, I mean, Ray Kurzweil is attached to Google, and Google is doing its own quantum computing. They're also building the fastest hardware to do machine learning. So a very, very powerful, well-heeled company like Google, if it were run by bad people, it might have a bad outcome.
And the neural interface, which is something that DARPA is focusing on, I'm sure that Sandia is too as well, and so is Elon Musk. This is their goal. And I had Michio Kaku on the show. It was 6 years ago, where he said that they're already downloading at DARPA. And that this interface was done. I don't know if he was speaking with direct knowledge or that he heard from somebody, but he did make the statement. How close are we with this neural network? Elon Musk said last month, and I know that you heard this too yourself. He said, man, I think we're a few months away of making a pretty major announcement on this.
I believe that people have been working all over the world on figuring out how to have sensors sit close to the human brain without putting things inside the brain and reading what was going on in the brain. And then from that, enable actions to be taken by machinery that's sitting on the side. I don't know at all whether the direction is the other direction works, where the computer can dump stuff into the brain. I do not know that of my own knowledge.
Is that something that you would work on at the Hume Center, or is this out of your wheelhouse?
Okay, so it's really out of our wheelhouse, and I'm going to tell you why. Because the laws about human experimentation would make that so expensive to do at Virginia Tech, and the lawyers at Virginia Tech just wouldn't allow us to do it. So it's out of our wheelhouse.
And what about one last thing, and then we got to hit a break here, is the announcement of some of these latest swarming drones that were on the verge of being deployed in the Air Force, where they would have 1,000 of these mini drones, attack drones, that would fly autonomously in swarms over a known theater and battlefield was imminent. And that was a pretty, and then suddenly, and that was about 3 years ago, and then there was silence on that. Is that because the program was shut down because it scared the crap out of the rest of the planet, or that if it is going to be deployed, we would know about it?
Okay, so typically the military does not tell you about deployments of things like that. But as I told you before, Virginia Tech worked on such a system, but its job was to provide sensors to look over the battlefield or the space where the squadron beneath it was walking and operating, and tell them what the situational environment was like, so they could plan better, be safer, so forth. And to my knowledge, that is being used in tests, if not in actual theater. So that kind of work is being done at Virginia Tech, and we have a huge drone cage for those things to be trained, where we learn how to do the algorithms and can fly them safely and they don't run into anything. So also Virginia Tech is the home to the Mid-Atlantic Aviation Partners, where we're teaching drones how to deliver packages to fixed addresses, it was 2 years ago when Chipotle delivered me my lunch to the parking lot.
Okay, and so what would be the change in coding to change that lunch into a thermonuclear device, right? or a lethal weapon of some kind?
Okay. So that has been reported in the news that bad guys in the Middle East have done that to our troops. So I would have to say, if those news stories are correct, then it's already being done. And so they take simple things. They take simple things like hand grenades and have a wire in it, and if the drone drops it over the top of troops, the thing is actuated, and so the hand grenade goes off right above the ground. So that has been in the news, and if true, it's already being done.
Let's take our break right here. Our guest tonight, Bob McGwire. Great conversation. We're going to pick this up when we come back. And going back to the neural network, I got to discuss downloading and uploading your consciousness. We'll be right back. More with Bob McGwire after this short break. Stay with us. Welcome back, Faded Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. If you ever miss a live show like this one right here, you missed the live show, there's an easy solution. AI. Yeah. Get our podcast. That's what you do. Click on the podcast banner over at jimmychurchradio.com. It's just $2 per month. You have access to 1,200 shows right there, and it's all good. Just $2 per month. All right, Bob. Now, the funnest debate that I hear go down with physicists and scientists and engineers today is the uploading and downloading of consciousness, and of us, and achieving immortality, and that this is the future. Inevitably, we'll get rid of our meat sacks, and we will all exist on computer chips of some form or another. The question I have for you as we get into this on the front side, would you do it? Right? The technology is perfected, and you can be uploaded onto a drive. Do you do it?
So let me tell you, I read Frederick Pohl's The Heechee Saga, where we discovered this alien race that had been all over our galaxy, and we just that they had these fan-like things that turned out to be the storage for their dead's consciousness. And since that time, I thought, it'd be pretty cool when my body's worn out if I could go into a Heechee fan and live forever. The answer is probably I would.
Oh, you just got cut off.
Okay, the answer is I would do it.
Wow. Okay. I think the NSA has now stepped in. Officially. I expected it to happen, so I welcome them to our family. So you would do it. And okay, let's explore some of the issues here. I love the movie Tron. It's the original Tron. I dreamt about living that existence and how cool that would be. An infinite life of learning and just exploring. But a few issues are raised. Number one, and I want to make sure that I'm understanding this correctly, Bob, if you upload yourself onto your memory, everything is there, right? The duplicate of you. But you are still you. You're not, at that instant, the new you is developing its own memories and life. But you are not inside of the computer. You're still sitting in your body, right? Yep. You're not experiencing the computer world. The new you is experiencing the computer world, but you can't share that, can you?
Depends on how all that works, but you probably could have shared consciousness. If you're able to move data back and forth, you could figure out how to simultaneously store memories and experiences in both systems, would be my guess. And I'm certain that it would be tried. Whether or not it would drive you crazy is a thing I think we're only going to learn with human experimentation. But I'm certain it will be tried so that you kind of always stay up to date.
Would it be with, like Oculus, or you would have some kind of VR headset to experience the life that is going on and the artificial reality, that AR that is being created in real time on the chipset, right? You're going to be living in some type of reality. And then
I'm sure it'd be like virtual reality or something like. It'd be like living in a simulation with some kind of virtual reality. But hypothetically, I could see you being in that situation in one of these simulations that's so perfect you wouldn't know you were not alive. You would know that you were only you would not know that you were only a computer.
And which is the way that it was, and if you think about it, right, back in the early 80s, 82, when Tron came out, that's exactly how it was represented. They didn't know that they were computer programs. They didn't know that they were living inside of the computer.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I really enjoy these flights of fantasy and the speculation because I don't see it happening anytime soon, but I'm just going to tell you, I would like to do it, and I'll tell you why, because I don't mind telling you why, is because I could live long enough to travel to the stars if we don't have warp drive, because I could just go to sleep, as in put my subroutine to sleep, and wake it up when I got to the place I wanted to go. And I would not have lost a lot. I felt like I've been traveling forever. And I wouldn't need food, I wouldn't need water, etc. And I'd just be able to travel and see lots of things in the galaxy. It would be pretty exciting for me to be able to do that.
Well, and the other part, this is what, when I let my fantasies go with this idea, is you may sleep and rest. I would read every published book known to man. That's what I would do, right? I would learn. I would take classes. I would do things.
Yep, and I got to tell you, so that's one of the major, I think, pluses of this brain to computer interface is if it works as everyone thinks it will work or wants to work, that's exactly the kind of thing you'll be able to do. Is you'll be able to read a lot and learn new skills in kind of downloads.
Now, if we look at this from another angle, where our planet it's already interconnected, that part, every computer, every phone, everything everywhere, if it's not connected to the network, it has the ability to connect. So what would stop an outside influence like ET from tapping into our computer system and putting us on lockdown?
I can't think of anything except all sorts of security measures, which right now we don't know how to do because we don't know how to download the consciousness. But we better think about security because we don't want bad humans or bad aliens or bad ultra-terrestrials messing with our consciousness. We better think about that.
The other part to this, I don't know if you know Greg Hausch, but Greg is one of the founders of Anonymous. And very smart guy, very cool guy. He's been a guest on the show a couple of times, and he was on my TV show on History Channel. And I got a chance to hang out with him pretty extensively in New York. And one of the things that Greg said to me when we were talking about security and access, things that he was convicted of, you know, he went to federal prison as well as a bunch of other members of Anonymous. That's another story altogether. But I asked Greg, I said, okay, is there a computer system on this planet that you cannot break into that is totally secure? And his answer was quick. His answer was no.
That's correct. If you have physical access to a computer, you can do things to it. It becomes more difficult if you don't have physical access. But again, nothing built by a human is perfect. So there's always flaws. And typically, the worst thing is humans misuse their technology and make themselves vulnerable.
He said to me, that if I don't have physical access, then I'll get physical access. If that's something I have to overcome, and there's ways to do that. But once I have physical access, either remotely, right, with a laptop, or physically in front of the computer. But once I have that access, less than 5 minutes.
I don't know about the less than 5 minutes, but if you have physical access and can operate on the innards of the computer, it is not secure.
Now, does that scare you? That
it's bothersome.
It is bothersome. And one of the things that I think we need to be concerned about is our home networks. And the reason why, because of the simplicity of the software that everything is running on, and I'm talking about smart anything, right? You don't have some advanced computer chip in your refrigerator or your TV or Alexa or whatever it is, your thermostat, your smart thermostat, whatever it may be, it is the basic of the basics. And access to that, I would think, is really, really simple. And if there was somebody that was bored or was angry or was just terminated from their job and wanted to shut down things, they actually could, couldn't they? They could wreak havoc on the country.
It would be bad if you let the bad person into these systems. They could really make your life miserable.
What are we doing to prevent this?
Okay, so the early versions of these systems, they were not as secure as they should be, and so a really good thing has happened at Virginia Tech. Which, if you don't mind me plugging, is we've started the Commonwealth Cyber Initiative, where we are studying how to make Internet of Things, which is the kind of things you've been talking about, secure against intrusion, etc. So it's going to be an ongoing effort. And the thing that has prevented good security in a lot of these devices is just exactly what you expect. If it costs 50 cents more, they prefer not to do it. So we have to figure out how to overcome the resistance of putting good security in all these devices, so that they are, so that the bottom line isn't the only thing that is built into the consideration of what you put in a system. They need to be provably secure. And who sets the provably secure standards? Well, that's part of the research that's going to be done at places like the Commonwealth Cyber Initiative in Virginia, and other entities like it across the country and the world. Security of these systems is paramount because we are turning our lives over to these systems.
The basic system that everything runs on is Android, correct?
That's one of the major systems, and Android is a big one.
And how secure is Android? I had read, they do security updates all the time, and that's not what I'm referring to. I had read that the systems in most smart homes are using older versions of Android, and the firmware and those versions of Android are not updatable. Is that true?
Some of these devices, you do not have the ability to update the firmware, and I think that that's not advisable, that you need to be able to update them. But again, you don't want to have a bad actor be able to come in and update your firmware and do bad things with it. So verification and validation are critical to not allowing that to happen. So firmware needs to be updatable, and protecting the update process is the most important thing, because that is the physical access that you, the customer, are allowing to your devices. So you want to make sure the devices have really secure update mechanisms before you allow them.
And what do we do before we switch gears here and get into UFOs? The video that circulated a couple of months ago, which scared me to my very core. I'm a parent, okay? I'm a parent. I have two beautiful daughters. And this video surfaced of somebody that got access to a baby monitor. A child walks into their bedroom, and this guy is watching the little girl and says that he is Santa Claus, right? And starts talking to her. Says a couple of things, crazy stuff. But the point is, it's about as disturbing of a situation. It's like the TV show Black Mirror, but for real. Mm-hmm. And that is a nightmare scenario for every parent, just about anybody in the country, that somebody could gain access to the cameras inside of your home and speak to you or speak to your children. That's a zone that we need to prevent. Did you see the video?
I saw the video, and I agree it is very creepy. So it has to be the case that these devices have very, very high quality encryption and very, very high verification and validation for anyone who is going to access them. So you want to only allow access to the innards to say things if it's heavily encrypted and the person or other machine that's talking to that device has to be okayed by the parents. So all new systems that come along, now that we understand we can do all these things, but we've done them by the cheapest possible way, they need to have these verification, validation, and encryption systems in them as a matter of course, or parents and other people should not allow them in their homes.
What do we do about that, though? I mean, that's obvious, simple advice. Not everybody's going to do that. And we also expect when we purchase systems like this that they are already secure, that we don't need to take these extra steps, right? So how do we take the extra steps and get people to listen? Or should it be built in automatically and It's just plug and play, and security is already there.
I think that we should have plug and play, and security is already there. And as much as this word is hated by lots of people in the United States and around the world, I think this is going to be principally done by regulation. And whenever you have regulation of this type, we have to understand that there are going to be bad actors that are going to sell devices that violate the regulations but are cheaper. We just have to come to the place where people are educated about the safety features that are built into these systems, and these safety features are worth the $5 extra for the device because it protects your children and your home and your property and your life.
How much today, before we get to the top of the hour, and we'll get to UFOs, much has been made about the Patriot Act and the ability for the NSA in Utah to collect the phone records, the phone calls, the audio, the text of every single transmission inside of the United States, public and private, without warrant. Then it was stated 6 months ago that this program had stopped. Has the program stopped?
It has stopped, and that's because the law has not been renewed. And the thing that Edward Snowden reported was ended under Obama, and that program that you're talking about is stopped for now. If the Congress re-enables it and changes it anyway, the intelligence community will follow the law.
What was actually collected? Were they the audio, right? Were the phone calls actually being recorded?
Okay, so again, I'm not going to tell you exactly what was recorded because that's covered under my security oaths. But I do want to tell you what the law is so that people understand. A collection on a U.S. person is listening to the content of the conversation. That is forbidden by law, it's forbidden by regulation, and we need to go to the right kind of court to get a warrant to do it. Now, the FISA court's been a lot in the news lately, but my own personal experience is the FISA court, as done by the NSA and others, is obeyed. And that's because those are our fundamental rights. So whatever is recorded, it is not consumed if it's a U.S. person without a warrant under the law. If the law is violated, people should be punished.
The way that it has always been portrayed, of course, by Snowden and others, movies and stuff, is it's a click of a mouse. Right? Click of a mouse, and you go to your friends list, and you can go spider web out to any individual and literally click, and you've got all the action that you need right there. Before the funding stopped, the way that Edward Snowden portrayed it, is that what was happening?
So that is the way Edward Snowden portrayed it, and I'm going to leave that to Edward Snowden. I can tell you that the Patriot Act allowed metadata to be collected. So that is not the actual content of the transaction. It is the existence of the conversation, and the associated phone numbers was allowed to be collected. But again, I can't target you, Jimmy Church, for even your metadata without a warrant. So the system might store it someplace so that if you act bad, I can go back in time and look at your bad activities once I have the warrant. But if I can't look at that stuff without a warrant, and people got fired for that. So occasionally a person will do something wrong, like they want to take a look at something they shouldn't look at about somebody they know. They are fired. And if they've done it bad, a really bad thing, they're prosecuted. So this is a rule about how you have to behave when you have access to constitutionally protected data. I have to be trained on what the rules are 4 times a year. If I don't get that training 4 times a year, I can't even log into my computer or use the phone. It is strictly enforced, and you are required to go through training of what your responsibilities are 4 times a year.
The data collection officially stopped after the funding stopped 6 months ago, or maybe a little bit longer. What happened to the previous data?
So let me correct you. The collection stopped because the law that allowed it expired, not because the funding stopped.
Oh, yeah, correct. It wasn't re-upped. It wasn't re-upped. But the previous data, that's not erased. They still have that, though.
I do not know the answer to that.
Okay.
I just don't know.
Your lawyerly skills are tremendous.
You got to be when you're in this business because you can get in real trouble.
We're going to take a break right here, and before we go there, the interest in UFOs and UAPs and all things alien, which is part of your work now. I want to know after the break when that started, but the other people that you work for, and I'm specifically talking about Virginia Tech and government contracts, are they cool with it? Do they know, or are they encouraging your work in this field?
They are not encouraging it, and this is an outside activity that I am not hiding, and they almost surely know. Some people have already said stuff to me, but it's my life, it's my personal private business, and I have not lost my security clearance yet. So I doubt I will lose my security clearance because I'm going to behave, and no one has said anything bad to me about it. I'll give you an example. Of how little it impacts people now. The chief information officer for Hawkeye 360 is on the advisory board for To the Stars Academy.
Now we're talking. All right, let's take a break right here. This is Fade to Black. Our guest tonight, Bob McGwire. What an amazing conversation. And wait till you hear what we're going to talk about next. That's right. The search that is going on in the skies above the United States. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back, Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. You can become an official Fade or Not by going to our membership section at jimmychurchradio.com. Become a game changer today. Get those autographed shirts and hats. We've got some new shirt designs that are coming out for you, game changers, and you're going to be excited about those, and that's really cool. And also, we're going to be kicking off something next. We might have it ready by this Thursday, and hopefully we'll be able to make these announcements about a little thing that we're going to be doing and promoting here on Fade to Black, and it's going to be really cool. So get ready for that too as well. But visit the membership section at jimmychurchradio.com. Now, Bob, and mentioning TTSA, it's kind of funny. I don't know if you're watching Twitter, but the mention of TTSA these days does not, you don't get rainbows and unicorns.
No kidding.
No, you don't. What an opportunity wasted, and we'll see. Hopefully the future will change, and TTSA will get the train back on the tracks. But that being said, where did your interest in UFOs and UAPs start?
Okay, so when I was young, I was kind of a nerdy, geeky guy a little bit, and I had telescopes and stayed out in the yard a lot at night, and I saw a couple of UFOs when I was growing up. So, and then I was a science fiction buff, a science and technology kind of guy. So I've always wanted to figure out how I could travel to the stars, and so this just kind of been in the background. Then all the noise began to happen starting in 2016. And by the time the end of 2017 came, I went, wow, the government is admitting there are things that are flying in the sky over ships, etc., and they don't know what they are. And that was it. I said, okay, this is something I don't know if I'm ever going to have anything to do with this, but I did see some UFOs when I was young, and I'm going to see if there's something I can think about. And I figured out that Jimmy Church was worth listening to, and Richard Dolan was worth reading. So I joined the Richard Dolan membership deal on his website, and then shortly after that, he opened up a forum where all of the Richard Dolan members could interact with each other, and it filled up with several hundred really interesting people from all walks of life, all over the world, all sorts of different experiences, from the completely strange to I just saw a UFO. And I met Joel Dodd, who was also in that group. And he went, there's a lot of talk in here. There's not a lot of action. And so what do you think? I says, well, there's a deal that most people don't understand, and most people don't actually get, that technology is a thing that increases in capabilities at a huge rate, and at the same time, the price falls through the floor as all these capabilities go up. I said, we can take a really small computer, hook cameras to it, hook all sorts of other sensors, and see if we can't do better than just record a video. And that was the beginning. We had several people show up, Steve McDaniel, Adam Allen, other people that just come along and joined in and donated their time, because the company UAP Tracking Network, Inc. is a not-for-profit company, and we have applied for scientific research status nonprofit with the Internal Revenue Service. That's called 501c3. So the people in it are not making money. What we're doing is trying to build sensors that people can deploy if they feel they have UAP activity near them, and it'll run the sensor system and gather the data, and like video, magnetometers, all sorts of other things that we're going to put the temperatures, the pressures, the accelerations. If any kind of these kind of effects happen around the sensor, it's going to collect all that metadata and any videos and send it to a cloud. And it's going to filter the videos and other things, so it does not record airplanes, because airplanes in the United States and around the world are now required to transmit a beacon, which gives their tail number, their altitude, their direction, their current latitude and longitude. So you can eliminate an airplane by listening to these beacons, and this little computer has a little gizmo you can just plug into a USB port, and it'll listen to these airplanes. So we can exclude airplanes. So the North American Defense Group, NORAD, maintains the numbers that allow you to predict satellite positions for everything in orbit. And you can the public can download these numbers. So you download these numbers, you put them on your little computer, and you calculate what satellites are overhead, and at the same time, compute what satellites are being illuminated by the sun. And if your camera is pointing at a moving object and you see that it's one of these satellites, you don't record it and you don't send it home. So the computer does several things. If something is moving and it's interesting and it's putting off interesting emanations, magnetic field disturbances, acceleration disturbances, UV radiation, these kinds of things, we're going to record that video. But if it doesn't have these extra things, but it's doing something interesting, in the video, like moving with non-ballistic motion, we also want to record it. So motion detection happens in the camera. That's not good enough. So we want to exclude airplanes and satellites and things like it. But it's also the case that we want to take machine learning algorithms and exclude things that we do not believe should be recorded and sent back. So right now, we just have the basic motion detection in our system, and we're going to be gathering data and learning how to exclude things that we don't want to record. So this is as I said, a scientific research and development group that is doing pretty well as far as compared to things that other people are doing. We're learning what hardware we want to recommend people attach to our little device. And then we're going to send all the stuff to the cloud. That's number one. After, what do we do with the data? We make it available to anyone that wants to do analysis on it. We might do our own analysis. We want other people to trust the data is done well enough with complete provenance, lots of associated metadata, so they know everything about how it was collected and what came with it, so scientific research can be done on this data. So it's not somebody holding a shaky video telephone. The cameras ultimately will be pan-tilt zoom cameras with really good capabilities, low light level capabilities, able to track and zoom, but it'll be under the control of a computer and not somebody's shaky hand. So because we want to get high quality video, high quality extra environmental data that says things are happening. So I did things like read strange effects from UFOs, which was a NICAP report that was done by Gordon Lohr for Don Kehoe way back in the day. Mm-hmm. And so I said, what are all these strange things that are happening? And other documents like that. And said, what sensors are there available that would sense these things? And Jimmy, they're really cheap. These sensors are really cheap. And you just plug them into the computer, and the sensor data is recorded with the video and sent home for analysis. Is there a mobile version of this? So not right now. We haven't planned the mobile version, but that should be in our future. Right now, we're trying to get the basic system functioning. You and I, right? We've got a facility that we're going to be doing some sky watching here in Burbank. It's beautiful, up in the mountains, gorgeous, right? And so we get a bunch of us together. I've got my fancy night vision goggles, and so do the other Fadernauts, and we're up there drinking and cooking and sky watching. But having you show up with this system would be the right thing to do. You could almost track this data in real time. We're looking at a bird or a satellite and getting excited, and you could crush all of our emotions, right? I could crush your emotions. And so not available now, but planned for the future is these systems will be controlled by your cell phone. So let's suppose you see an object, you've got your system with you, and you think it might be interesting. You could point your cell phone at it, and the system would automatically go track it and collect data on it, but it would tell you, I think you're an idiot, or this might be interesting. So, and it will not have a shaky video. So that's not available now, but it is planned. We want these systems to be controlled by handheld devices, so you get most out of them. And as the system collects the video, it'll display on your phone. The magnetic part, that type of anomaly, are you suggesting that this would have to be something physical, something metallic, something that is giving off this type of data? If it's changing dramatically the magnetic field that is natural to the Earth, so that it's the deviation from the current magnetic field of the Earth is large enough that we say, hey, that's a strange event that we want to record. Could you get the same, we're getting into theoretical stuff here, but could you get the same data collection
from something that was maybe energy related?
Oh, of course you could. If there are spikes in the electric distribution system, those kinds of things can in fact influence this. So you want to be able, again, just like I told you with airplanes and with satellites, you want to be able to exclude things that are not of interest. So again, this is a learning algorithm process that has to be done. And do I believe it will exclude every kind of noise? No. No system is going to exclude every kind of noise. Mm-hmm. But what we want to do is exclude so much noise that we have a much higher probability of getting something worth looking at.
I have seen a lot of crazy things, right? And you've listened to this show enough. I don't need to go into repeat mode and discuss this. But
no, you're the things you saw at Mount Adams were wild.
Yeah, crazy. Well, okay. So, for instance, is there a distance factor that comes into play? Mount Adams is 14 miles away from our location that we made these observations on. And this object was directly north of the mountain. No, wait, heading east. This system would detect that. Okay,
so it will detect the motion of the object. The object itself, if it has emanations and they're strong enough to exceed our threshold, we will record that data with it. So we're going to be looking for strange radio signals, strange magnetic anomalies, strange acceleration anomalies, and if they exceed a threshold, we're going to record it. But something as far away as that may or may not give one of these emanations that exceeds the threshold.
What about size and mass?
So the size and mass of the object. So look, you know as well as I do that we don't know how these things operate. We don't know what their propulsion is. But we see reports of them giving off glowing energy, and that glowing energy is an emanation that we hope we would be able to sense. And again, there's so little data collected on this. Right now, I can't give you a definitive answer as to whether or not any of my sensors will actually detect it. But that's part of the learning process. What sensors do I need to show that this is an object that's doing something strange and we want to record it?
And now the next part, and certainly with your experience with Hawkeye 360 and systems like that are integrated in positions, will you be able to get coordinates and extract those?
Okay, so if you had two of these systems and two of them track the object, then you're going to have you could use the parallax. You can see the azimuth, elevation, and of the cameras, and say these two cameras, the lines from the lens to the object crosses way out there, and you'll be able to say something about the distance.
How are you locking the two systems together? That's what you would have to do. That's how GPS works, right?
Yeah. Okay. And you gave the answer. So all of these systems are going to have a GPS system in them. So the data that's being collected is time stamped, so that the timestamp will tell you that these two systems are recording data at the same time, and there's a tick mark at the second. And as the data is collected, you will see these second marks that are on the data, and you'll be able to tell what time it is for the data on each of the systems, and that's how you would align them.
And how quick is the response time?
Okay, so that's a very good question. Okay, so right now we're considering three different cameras. And there's inexpensive, and by that I don't mean $20. I mean a couple of $100 up to really expensive, over $1,000. The over $1,000 one, it really moves the camera fast. I mean, really fast. The least expensive one, it moves it pretty good. It can swing all the way around in a couple of seconds.
It's that would be the most important thing, and the reason why I ask is when somebody sees something, the first question I have is, did you take a picture? I don't know how many sightings I have had that lasted a second, right, or two. You don't have time to take out your cell phone or react and click on camera and point it. The object's going to be gone. You're also caught up in the moment. Yep. So you would have to have a system. For example, Bob, we're out, got a couple hundred people. We're out sky watching, and up above us, and it was large. It took up a big section of the sky, and it was some type of. It was I describe it as aquamarine. That it was bluish green in color. Powered up, went across the sky, and carved a giant backwards Z going from right to left. So imagine doing a backwards Z, right, across from right to left. It lasted about, I don't know, a second, right? A second and a half. So
let me tell you where we're going with this. So the systems we want to deploy, ultimately, we will have on the end game 2 cameras. And one of them is this fancy pan tilt zoom camera where you can point it at the object, zoom in, and get a good view of it. The other one is a fisheye, and the fisheye will see all sky, and so it will be able to give rough coordinates for the pan tilt zoom to look. And very quickly spin around and look. Once the fisheye sees something, it'll compute where the pan tilt zoom should look. Now, we're not doing that on day one. We're just building the system up piece by piece, but the ultimate system will have the ability to look at all sky and find things that are bright or large or moving, and then tell the other camera, point over here, please, and zoom, and get there in less than half a second. This has been thought of, but it's just an incremental thing to add it. And the way we're building the system is you can plug in new capabilities and it'll automatically begin to use them, but it'll work to the best of its ability without the capability. So it's upgradable dynamically.
And what about locking on to, and certainly if you were communicating back to NORAD or other systems, what if you locked onto a plane that didn't have a tail number, right?
If you lock onto a plane that doesn't have a tail number, send it so we can identify which military vehicle it is.
Yeah, you know what I mean? What if we, our amateur UAP crew now has the ability to lock on to something we're not supposed to lock onto, like the X-37B, for instance.
Yeah, I want to go out with Jim Goodall and see what he can tell me to look at.
Yeah, I'm totally with you on that. And now, what about the difference between normal optics and, of course, night vision and tube pickup?
Yep. So the cameras that we are considering have very low light capability. They are not going to show up much except a bright object if it's no moon in the sky initially, because we're gonna initially deploy these things with not the greatest night vision cameras, realizing that the ultimate goal is to find the right camera that will work well at night. So I'm personally evaluating a camera which has a .0001 lux capability, so it'll work pretty dark, and it's imported from AliExpress, and when it arrives, I'll evaluate it. But right now, we're not going to suggest that camera because we're going to have to actually build the apparatus that it sits in. So the lens screws in, but then all the electronics is naked. We have to figure out how to package it. after we evaluate it.
Did you say a Chinese camera?
Yeah, from AliExpress.
Yeah. Really?
Well, I'm not going to take it into NSA. I'm going to leave it outside.
Really?
Yeah, I'm going to leave it outside.
Okay,
yeah.
all right.
So let me ask you this, Jimmy.
Yes.
What electronic device do you have that does not have Chinese components in it?
Yeah, the answer is none.
Exactly.
Yeah, I realize that. When we come back, we're going to head to overtime. Everybody, they're already asking Bob in Twitter. Oh, somebody said, "Is Bob creeping in Twitter tonight?"
So I'm not. I'm paying attention to you, so I don't foul up.
No, what you should say is, "Yeah, I'm always in Twitter, but I don't use my real name," and just freak everybody out. That's what you do.
They've already seen me creeping you, Jimmy, tonight.
The other part of this, Bob, which is the reality, is suppose everything runs great with UAPTN, right? Okay, everything is operating. Do you anticipate being approached by the Department of Defense, not only for your data collection, but maybe for assistance in tracking some of these UAPs?
Okay, so that's a very good question, and I'm going to tell you how we addressed it as a group before. We are making all the software open source, and the hardware is open specification, and we're going to give you a hardware list and tell you how to order it. So if the entity that wants our software and hardware, they can just go copy it because we're giving it away for free. And if they need our expertise, then they will have to approach the individuals and make them a consultant or something like that. But the corporation is going to be an open source entity.
Do you anticipate being contacted?
I wouldn't doubt it. Apparently other people have been contacted. I have not been contacted yet, but it is a thing that could happen.
Well, let's take our next break right here, and we're going to head straight into overtime. And the conversation is going to shift gears a little bit because we need to we got to talk about all things UFOs, and I got to know what makes Bob tick. So we're going to do all of that when we come back. This is Fade to Black Overtime with Bob McGwire. After this short break, stay with us on the Game Changer Network and KGRA, The Planet. Be right back. Welcome back, Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Our guest tonight, Bob McGwire, heading into overtime on the Game Changer Network and KGRA, The Planet. You can follow me on Twitter. That's simple, at JChurchRadio. And Bob's going to do the big disclosure now. Bob, what's your Twitter?
Bob McGwire _N4HY.
There you go. And we'll pop it up there on Twitter right now in the feed. And so everybody go and follow Bob. And I like saying that. Go and follow Bob. 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 All right, Bob, this is the thing. And I think everybody wants to know. Have you experienced something that you can't explain and you're trying to figure that out?
The answer is yes. Your guest last night certainly gave you the big hint.
And,
so,
okay, we're talking about Chris Bledsoe.
Yes, we are. We're talking about Chris Bledsoe. So, while a member of the Richard Dolan Forum, Richard announced that he was going to be doing an interview series with Chris. And as a member of that forum, you get to see all these interviews before the public. So I saw a couple of the interviews, and I researched Chris's history and went, wow, this is really interesting. And if I'm interpreting this correctly, Chris almost sees these things on demand. So I wrote him an email. It might have been a Facebook message, but whatever it was, I wrote him. And I says, look, Chris, I'm on the faculty at Virginia Tech, and I know that you don't allow anybody around much anymore, but I wonder if you would consider allowing my wife and I to come over and visit for a couple of days and talk to you about your experiences, and if possible, maybe we can see if we can go do some sky watching. And he thought about it for a couple of weeks, and I believe he probably interacted with whatever it is he's experiencing, and the way he told me was he interacted with whatever this thing is, and a very large orb appeared over him, and that's kind of his on-off signal. If the orb shows up, he thinks it's okay. So he wrote me back and said, "Sure, you can come over." And I says, "Well, look, it's almost Christmas. Let's come after the New Year." So my wife and I went over and visited in January, and it was rainy for a couple of days. So we sat around and got to know each other, and he told me a lot about his experiences. And like anybody else in that situation, he was very generous, and I asked a million questions, just like anybody would do. Some of my questions, he noticed, were a little more penetrating and a little closer to the mark because I knew some of the people he had interacted with professionally. So we did that for a couple of days. I got to learn a lot about him. By that time, UAPTN had not been formed. So we got a clear night, and we went outside. Chris and his son Ryan and I went outside, and we did sky watching. And we were looking all around us to see whatever we could see, and all of a sudden, a very large orb popped into existence, and it was extremely bright. It was much brighter than Venus. It's not as bright as the moon, but brighter than Venus, and you could tell that it was not a star. It had a diameter that you could. I couldn't tell how far away it was, and I was kind of excited, as you can imagine. And it flew across the sky. It did non-ballistic motion. That means it made impossible turns and impossible accelerations, and then drifted off to the north and slowly faded out. And I went, "Wow, that was interesting." I says, "I need to figure out whether or not that's a satellite." I says, "I don't think it's a satellite, but I need to figure out whether or not it is." And later on, I did it, and that's part of the reason we're putting this satellite thing in the system. So then we waited around, and another one, almost in exactly the same place, it flared up, flew over, changed colors, moved strangely. You could see something that looked like it was spinning really quickly, because it was rotating, looked like it was rotating really fast, moved across, and then slowly faded out. And I went, "Wow, that was interesting." And Ryan got that. It was through the trees, but Ryan got it on his phone. And I did not attempt to take a photo because I was determined just to take in everything I could to decide whether or not it would be worth trying to do something technical. And we continued to watch, and I noticed that there were things up in the trees that looked like they were flashing, like you might see fireflies, except it's the winter, so there were no fireflies, but it was popping like little flash bulbs.
Right.
And I went, am I seeing that? I says, I just can't figure out whether I'm actually seeing that or whether I'm excited and imagining it. And look, Chris claims they can read your mind, so maybe they were reading my mind. So they literally left the trees, went up in the sky where it was clear, and about 100 flash bulbs went off over the next 15 minutes. I was convinced then that they were not fireflies. Okay, so that was stopped, and it didn't go on anymore. We looked around, and Chris has a problem seeing at night. He's had lens replacements. This is his private information, but it's relevant to the story, and he won't mind me telling it. So he was not looking up. So I was looking up, and because I wanted to see something else pop up there. And I saw what looked like a purple glowing cloud a few feet above the trees, and it kind of went over us and just hung there. And I didn't say anything to Chris because I was, a little bit shocked, a little doubting, but I kept looking at it, and it looked like it had waves in it, like it was wavy. And Chris made a noise about, I think they're here. And I had not said a thing to Chris. So I sat there and looked. I just looked silently, and suddenly the purple thing winked out, and instantly Chris said, "Oh, they're gone." And I got to tell you, for a hard-nosed scientist, that was quite a night of an experience.
I've got Chris sent me some of the videos with you, and that I believe the purple one that you're talking about, I have it, right? And that, and I've seen some crazy stuff. I want to use some other colorful language right now, Bob. But anyway, I've seen some crazy stuff.
But mostly that's green.
Yeah, right. That's a crazy video.
No kidding.
And the shimmering video, I'm sure that you were there because Chris said in his communication with me, said this is something that Bob will I think testify, right? I think he said he would testify. And I have a hard time explaining that away in my mind, and I'm just looking at the video. For you,
I want to make sure we're talking about the same thing. Is it a spherical orb in the center of the video, and little fingers keep popping out of it?
Yes.
Okay,
well, that's one. That's one.
That was a video. That was a video that was taken by Chris. I was not present, but the raw original video. This thing moves across the sky, and Chris does his best to keep it in the center of his cell phone. Joel Dodd took that original video and used a fancy Adobe tool. And this Adobe tool took the video, put the thing in the center of the screen, and stabilized it. Mm-hmm. So all of Chris's shaky hand motions were removed, and the thing is centered. And the thing is in focus. You can look at it.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. It's pretty crazy.
There's no flash. It's in focus. These little fingers pop out of it.
It's like
really
Tesla. Yeah, it's like Tesla coil action.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Yeah,
and then you see something that looks like a porthole open in the center of it for just a second. And that video is amazing. It is not done with flash. So it is not dust and out of focus. And you can tell it's not out of focus because all the things that are on the surface are crisp. And these little fingers that keep popping out of it are clearly in focus. So I have no clue what that is.
Yeah, those fingers, when they jump out, it kind of scares you.
Right? I'm going like, what in the world is this?
Yeah, you're not expecting it.
No way.
But for you, after a night like this, experiencing this for the first time, paradigm shift, life-changing moment?
Yes, life-changing moment. I am going to build this sensor with my friends. We're going to do the best job we can. And I got to tell you, Jimmy, you've seen it, the kind of treatment that Chris has gotten in social media has not been good. And part of it is because Chris is an everyday working guy. He's a really good man. As you can see in private, he's as nice and kind and gentle as he was in your show, and he did the best job he could with his phone, but he needs better equipment. And I'm trying to do a better approach towards collecting evidence where it's less doubt, where we have the so when I saw those flash bulbs going off, I went, I bet those flashes can be detected with the right kind of radio, the right kind of magnetometer. And if something's holding these things up and moving them around, it's possible that there are acceleration anomalies because it's manipulating the gravitational field around them. Mm-hmm. So that is when the idea for all of these sensors came to my mind. And what we've done is do the best we can with what we can get. And they come so close to Chris. I believe we're going to catch some emanations from these things, because especially if they pop into existence, that's an electromagnetic pulse, and we ought to be able to see it in a radio.
How old are you, Bob?
I'm 66 years old.
So apparently you went through 60 years of your life plus without seeing any flashbulbs in trees, right?
I did not see any flashbulbs in trees. I saw fireflies in Alabama.
Right. Just like the rest of us. Yeah. And then suddenly you see something like this for the first time. You don't know if it's Chris, if it's geographically the area. It's certainly happening on that day at that moment. Yep. And your brain is trying to make sense out of going back to artificial intelligence, right? Machine learning, how That's a child correct. Learns. Well, you learn very quickly what a car is. You don't have to look at a car when you're 5 years old and have to think about what you are seeing. You now know you're seeing a car. And that's machine learning for the rest of your life, and you become quicker and quicker at it. You go out and you see something like this for the first time, and your brain is nothing but confused, isn't it?
That's correct. I guarantee you that's the response. I'm going, what in the blankety blank is that? Going through my mind.
Yeah, I believe I was just as colorful. The first night that I saw something nuts. I mean, the first time, and I'm with a group of people, that was my natural reaction. I mean, mm-hmm. I couldn't handle it. I remember, I want to ask what you and your wife talked about later on that night, because Rita and I, we walked away. We weren't even talking, Bob. We weren't. We were stunned. And I remember we got in our car. We had a meeting. We had a party to go to. Rita's looking out the window, and she goes, "They're here." That's mm-hmm. all she could. Those are the words that she could speak at that moment. What did your wife and yourself discuss later?
So we discussed what we had seen. Now, I want to say that I feel that I had an advantage over your situation only in the following sense. I went there to close doubt on whether or not stuff was happening, but I went there for the purpose of seeing those kinds of things. And there were lots of stuff on the internet about what Chris had seen and how he had seen it, how John Alexander had seen one of these orbs pop over their head, and so forth. So I knew something about what it was supposed to look like. So it wasn't like I was scared and going to run away, but it still shakes up your mind. You go, oh my God, all of Chris's stories are true. What the blank is that? And then it's I tell you, my own personal way of dealing with it was I began to mindfully breathe to try to stay mindful and look at it and take in everything, because I wanted to see everything. I didn't want to lose focus on what was going on around me so that I could remember it in detail later. And Sharon and I talked about it at length. And just so I left there. And I'll tell you the things that I have not told anyone else except for Chris. We left having forged a reasonable acquaintanceship, and I told Chris, I think I want to help you work on all this data. Jimmy, Chris has thousands of photos, hundreds of videos, tremendous amount of stuff, and it just needs a curator to deal with it, and I want to help him. So that's now. So I left, we went home, and the phenomenon followed my wife and I home. We were in our vacation home in Gulf Shores, Alabama, mm-hmm. and Chris and I were chit-chatting every day. I was trying to make up my mind about what to do, and a couple of strange things happened. I was laying on my bed reading a book, which I often do at night before I go to sleep, and something hit my leg. And I didn't know what it was, and I didn't pay any attention. So I just went back to reading my book. And then something hit my leg again. And I looked, and there were drops of water on my leg. So I went, where did the water come from? So I climbed up, looked at the ceiling. There's a skylight in there, but there was not a sign of a leak. And I went, what in the world is this? And I just put it out of my mind and went to sleep. The next day in the morning, the water drops hit my leg again. And I went, Sharon, please come look at this. I think there's water on my leg. She says, yeah, there are water drops on your leg. And not only that, there's spots all over the blanket. I says, I can't tell where this water is coming from. So I says, this is really strange. She says, yeah, it is. So several hours later, I had decided to lay down and take a nap, and she was back in the back reading or working on clothes or something back in the other end of the house. And simultaneously, both of us are sprayed like a water pistol.
What?
Rushed like a water pistol, right out of the middle of the air like an apport. And I went, oh my goodness. I picked up the phone, and I called Chris, and his first reaction was, something happened, didn't it? Jimmy, that's an existential, that's an epistemological change in everything. I mean, I didn't believe in apports, and all of a sudden I'm getting sprayed with water out of midair in my home. And I went, Chris, I'm all in. I believe all this stuff now. But look, my job is not belief. I'm not here to believe. I'm here to gather data. And here are the things I want to do. Because if there's data to be gathered around this is a phenomenon that people ought to be able to study. Because I don't have a clue what happened to me and my wife or why it was done. But this is one of the strangest experiences I've ever had in my life. And it happened for 3 days until I acknowledged its existence, that it had to be associated, picked up the phone and called Chris, and it never happened again.
So you got super soaked.
I got super soaked, called Chris, and they stopped super soaking me.
Now, this is the thing, okay? Obviously, Bob, you know this is crazy talk, okay?
It's wild.
It's crazy talk.
Wild.
It's crazy talk. You come from a background of numbers, of codes, of thinking about science and pragmatic. You are not in the consciousness, spirituality. There's weird things out there that we can't explain. That is not your world. You come from the other world. Now, how do you deal with this? Because this is against the grain.
I want to tell you what people have said, and it's the same with me. Once you see all this and you've experienced it, you are not the same. And I go, I don't know what this is. Chris has a bunch of interpretations and beliefs. My job in this, as far as I am concerned, is not belief. It's gather data so that it can be studied, because that's the only way I know how to think. I don't know what it is. I don't have a clue. I know that it's real. My wife and I experienced it as being real, and we just going to do what we can to figure out what it is. And at the same time, I'm going to help Chris curate these thousands of pieces of data he has and has not shared.
Tomorrow, you're going to get called into the dean's office, and he's going to say, Bob, interdimensional super soaker from a portal, from a dimension in time, a parallel world. Really?
Yeah, I can tell you, it was as wild as that. So Bob has decided to do the following thing. I'm retiring in May, and I can do what I want.
You know, that's a wonderful thing. But let me ask you a direct question.
Yep.
The super soaker, this experienced super soaker. I can't believe I said that on the air with you, but nonetheless, this was a physical event. This was a real event. You were not asleep. Your wife, your wife. This was a physical event. Did this
Correct.
materialize? Was it created out of thin air? Did it come from another dimension and it just entered this dimension? You've got to rationalize this in your own mind. You've got to make sense of it. What do you think?
Okay, so that I was going to tell you, as a scientist, that is not what I do. Because the answer is, Jimmy, I don't know. I know this. The water was real, and we did everything we could to figure out where it came from. And it wasn't a leak because it had been sunny and hot and clear for 3 days. So it just was not rain leaking in from the roof. I got all around the roof of the room and it happened in 2 different parts of the home. And simultaneously, 2 people squirted, and neither one of the roofs had leaks in them. I'm just telling you, it was really weird.
Do you think, as we wind this down, let's suppose that the same experience happened to somebody like Brian Greene, right, the physicist, or Lawrence Krauss, right, or Sam Harris, these very famous non-believers. Skeptics is being too kind. Does this change their world?
I'm sure that they would attempt to rationalize it.
They would.
I'm just telling you, everything I tried to do to rationalize it failed. And if they are honest with themselves and it happened to them, they would have a lot of head scratching to do.
I don't understand why the science community, the real science community, because they hear about night vision, they hear about these sky watches, they hear about these, they hear all the report, they read, it's in the news. I don't know why they don't apply the scientific method and go out and at least try to witness this and then maybe approach it from a scientific mind so we can all work together. There's a line in the sand that won't be crossed here, Bob, and I don't understand why.
Okay, so as a scientist, I can tell you a part of this equation. All of the equation, but it's a part of the equation. Aside from the obvious worry about ridicule, a faculty person at a research university is required to raise from sponsoring entities to do research. And so if I want to spend university resources to study the phenomenon, I have to get it funded. There are no funding sources, Jimmy, that scientists can do it. So part of me wanting to collect this data, APTN, and I joined the Society for the SCU group, which is a bunch of scientists trying to collect data on UAPs. I joined that group as a just joining member, not a collaborator, but a joining member, so that we could talk together. But again, until there's enough data gathered so that somebody can say scientifically interesting, we will have a hard time finding any kind of funding source that will fund this research. And no funds, no Buck Rogers. That's just the way it is. You have to teach classes, or you have to have funded research. And if you can't get it funded, you're not doing it on university property because they expect you to pay for the use of the equipment out of your research funds.
And that's just the way it is. There's no change.
The way it is.
It's just the way that it is.
There's no need to be ugly about it. It's just how the system works.
Right. Hey, Bob, thank you.
My pleasure.
This was an amazing evening for me personally on the show. I get to talk about all the things that I'm fascinated with from somebody that can give me an and in return, the audience, the answers that we seek. And it was just a wonderful conversation. I look forward to hanging out with you in person, of course, but also getting you back on the show. And if there's any assistance that you need with UAPTN and the website and getting the word out, you just let us know. We are here to support you. Thank you so much, Bob.
Thank you, Jimmy.
Have a great night.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bob McGwire. Now, the links for Bob are over at jimmychurchradio.com. You can see right there, UAPTN.com. Everybody get involved. With that, I am going to roll credits and get out of here. Bob just went, first-time guest, Bob went pole to pole. It doesn't get any better than that. Thank you so much, Bob McGwire. Fade to Black's executive producer is Rita Camarion. Show is produced by Hilton J. Palm, Renee, Dennis, and Bob. Announcers are Steve Harder, Gene Vitoa, Mark D. Kovar. Webmaster is Drew the Geek. Music, Doug Aldrich. Intro, Spaceboy, spaceboymusic.com. Fade to Black is produced by KJCR for the Game Changer Network, and syndication is KGRA, The Planet. This broadcast owned and copyrighted 2020 by Fade to Black and the Game Changer Network, Inc. It cannot be rebroadcast, downloaded, copied, or used anywhere in the known universe without written permission from Fade to Black or the Game Changer Network. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Tomorrow night, right here, Dr. Diana Pasolka. You're not going to want to miss that show. Until then, everybody be safe. Go Beckley Tepe.